name is Joseph Jaco Sapien. I was born in October 27, 1983, and I was U.S. Army.
Your highest rank?
Yeah, I was E4 specialist when I got out.
Okay. Conflict that you served in?
I was part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, the initial wave in 2003.
Cool.
So, I was born in Modesto, California, and really raised in Modesto and Ceres, so almost like Reseda, Tarzana, kind of, you know?
Okay.
So when my parents divorced, my mom moved 5 miles down the road, and so she lived in Ceres and my dad lived in Modesto, and so there was never a question of where to go. You could just kind of bounce left or right. And so my uncle was a Marine when I was a kid, and so I never really got to see him. He was gone all the time. But he would always send me posters of these cool jets or special forces and stuff like that. And you kind of had that thought in your head when you were a little kid, you know. But then as you got older, you're thinking maybe I could be a doctor, or maybe I could go into music or something. And so the military wasn't necessarily
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
But so the military wasn't necessarily a thought in your mind, say in junior high and beginning of high school. But then as I was getting ready to graduate, say going into my 11th, 12th grade, a lot of the guys I knew that graduated high school were stuck at a junior college for 6 years, 8 years.
Wow.
And so I was I don't want to do that. And I didn't know what I wanted to do if I signed up for junior college. And so the idea was if I join the military, then I'll have some time to figure out what I want to do. And if the military is cool, then I'll stick with it. If not, then hopefully you have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, then you're going back in, So at least I had that thing of it's either this or nothing. And so I started talking to recruiters. I totally forgot about this. I was working at Macy's at the time, scrawny ass kid, I think I was 160 pounds. And telling my uncle I'm thinking about joining the military, and so my uncle's a Marine, and you would see him maybe once every 3 years, for a day or two, and then he'd be gone again. And just kind of tell him thinking wanting to join the military, but I figured because he was in the Marines, just joining the military would show respect, right? Because I'm the first grandson. My cousin Melinda's the oldest grandkid, but I'm the first grandson. My uncle didn't have any sons. And so I'm thinking, well, this is a way to kind of respect that too. And these two big-ass Marines, these white dudes, perfect square blocks, just huge, right? Offensive linemen, come into Macy's one day and they're like, "Are you Joe?" And you're yeah. Nervous as hell, what the hell? And they're like, "We're friends with your uncle, and he said you want to join the Marines, and you need to come hang out with us." Just really intense, and I'm kind of mellow, a Den Stein kind of voice. This is pretty much as loud as I get. And so they're like, "You need to come out and do all this stuff," and I'm looking at them I don't know how in the hell you get that big, but it looks like it's going to be a lot of effort on my part to look like you, And they're super intense, and they're like, "Is anybody messing with you? We'll kick their ass." And you're sitting in Macy's, putting shirts on a rack, and you're like, "No, we're okay." And so I'm you guys are too intense for me. I can't keep up with that. And they wanted to do a 5-year enlistment, and I'm I don't know. Because I was the first one to graduate high school since my grandma. And so 4 years of high school sounded like a long time, especially at that point, And so I'm thinking, oh, well, I'm the first one to graduate, I'm going to do something with my life,
Yeah.
And at the time, the recruiters are saying, oh, we don't take guys with GEDs anymore. You have to have a high school diploma. I'm oh, well, this is working for me. It's going to mean something. And so the Navy guy comes by and goes, "I got a 4-year enlistment, and you could, paint the ships and scrape stuff off." And I'm well, that sounds boring, And I'm not really into water in general. And so I'm eh. And so I'm kind of wondering, what should I do? And the Army guy comes by and goes, "I got a 2-year enlistment, and if you fall off my Humvee, you won't drown." And I was sold, And so we start going to the MEP station and taking all the tests, and I was still kind of nervous, so I honestly tried to get a lower score on the ASVAB test to have an excuse to say, you know, like, oh, tried, didn't make it, darn it. And it got like a decent score. It was like an 80 something or something. I really don't remember what the scores mean anymore. But it was like somewhere in the 80s. And the guy was like, wow, you did pretty good, especially around this area. And you're like, okay. And so they're like, yeah, you could sign up and do this or that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Man, really nervous. And I'm sitting there at the MEP station, and I go back into the waiting in the lobby room, right? So you're seeing everybody sign and say, I joined the Navy, I joined the Marines, and all this crap. And my recruiter comes by and goes like, well, what are you gonna do, dude? And I'm like sitting there thinking, I'm like, yeah, okay. And so I go back in there and I'm talking to the guy. He's like, I got a 2-year enlistment. My cousin Melinda was getting married in June, so I told him I couldn't leave until after the marriage. And so I was actually the maid of honor for my cousin because there's no girls in our family. You know, like she was the first. She was the last girl for like 30 years, 33 years.
Wow.
It was all boys after that, till my niece. So I was maid of the honor for that. And then I joined the 2-year enlistment. And he's like, you could stay stateside, you get a bonus, you know. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I did it thinking that it was a way to respect my uncle, and it was a way to honestly give back to the country because I was raised poor. And I was on, you know, we were on food stamps and all that stuff. So it was like, this country fed me, this country did everything, like, to help me get to this point, even though it wasn't incredibly high point or anything like that, but it was still something that was from within. And so there was that type of respect of, can I give something back? And at the time, I'll never forget that damn recruiter. He goes like this, he goes, he grabs the papers and goes, 2 years, what could happen? And this was in April Fool's Day, 2001. Yeah, so it was just before September 11th, right? And I'm 17. And so he goes, 2 years, what could happen? I'm like, I know that means something. And I just didn't know what, but I'm like, okay, whatever, and I sign it. And I go home and I tell my dad, and I'm like, hey, I joined the Army. And he's like, okay, I thought you were going to talk to me about this first, you know? Because I had to get my parents to sign off. And so technically it was all peacetime. I call my uncle and I tell him like, hey man, I joined the Army. And he's like, at least you did something with your life, and hung up on me. I was so mad, dude. Like, because I didn't realize that you're supposed to join the Marines. And I just thought join the military. But because I didn't join the Marines, it like offended him. Like, yeah, like it was like, oopsie. You know, but like, you didn't know.
You didn't know about like the little rivalries and stuff.
Not really, you know, like you would hear people make fun of like Coast Guard or Reserve
Right.
or something like that, but like it was just more like teasing, like you didn't think it was like a legit thing. Or like you could watch movies, you know, and you see Marines fighting with the Navy guys or whatever.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was like a thing, like I didn't know it was like the truth, you know? But my uncle's like a retired Marine, so like he's all about it, you know? I didn't know at the time. Yeah, it was just goofy.
What did your mom say?
She was nervous because I never left the state. So before I joined the military, the furthest I got out of California was like Reno or Tahoe.
Okay.
You know, so you're like 2
That's
feet
far.
down. You know, like you could say you were in Nevada, but really, were you? You know. And so I never had any concept of anything outside of California, really outside of Modesto. And I think my dad was more nervous than my mom. I think my mom was just naturally worried, you know, about like, are they gonna abuse you? You know, like are the drill sergeant's gonna beat you up or something, you know? And no, there was nothing like that. But it was different, man. Like, cause me and my brother's a year younger than me, and we played sports together our whole lives. So like, we're always on the same team. We're always doing something. And so joining the military was really the first time I was never around my brother. And I remember when I signed the paperwork and you wanted to tell somebody because you were excited that you joined, you know, at the MEP station. This dude was walking down the hallway and I swear to God, it looked just like my brother. And I'm like, dude, I just joined the Army. And then you blink and it's somebody else's face, and he's like, cool. like who the hell are you? And I'm like, oh, whoa. And so that was the first time you kind of realized, like, oh shit, he's not going to be around like he normally is, you know? And so that was kind of a weird thing of not being around your real family, you know, like how you're normally used to. But it was good though, like it was positive.
So once you joined, and you mentioned it was right before September 11th, where were you on September 11th?
So I started in July 25th, 2001 was when boot camp started. And I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And the whole time you're in boot camp, you're not really allowed to watch TV or read the newspaper or anything, you know, you're kind of secluded. And so you're always thinking of like, how are they gonna, you know, test you or mess with you, you know, like wake you up in the morning, destroy your bed or whatever, you know. The morning of September 11th, we're getting our Class A or dress uniforms, and we're in this big line, and this lady's doing this chalk line around my wrist, you know. I'm like, dude, I'm getting a fitted suit, like crazy, right? Like professional tailor-made suit, like it's an ugly suit, but it was for you. You know, the Marines got the nice ones. And she was listening to this little shitty little radio, and I remember that Pink was on, like one of her songs, and all of a sudden it cuts out, and you hear this guy say, an airplane crashed into the North Tower. And you're like, what the hell is that thing? You know, something like that. Like, you know, like, I can't remember if it was the South or the North Tower that got hit first. And then, like, it felt like 15 minutes later or so, it comes back on and goes, another plane hit the South Tower. And I didn't know nothing about New York. I didn't know nothing about the World Trade Center. So in my head, I'm thinking a little prop plane, you know, like a little, like, farm plane, crash into like a Catholic church steeple. So I'm thinking like Notre Dame kind of thing, and I'm like, where in the hell are all these drunk farmers going? Yeah. And all of a sudden you hear something on the radio like, there could be 100,000 people dead. And you're like, no way is this true. I'm like, this has to be a basic training thing to see if we're going to go AWOL or run away because World War III popped off. I'm like, this is some training BS. And all of a sudden you started seeing the drill sergeants get mad, you know. And because we're part of Fort Knox, the armor units went into the fronts of the base, and like the base was closed off, everything was like on lock. And then they started saying, okay, anybody from the East Coast, go over there and call home, make sure everything's straight. And you're like, what the hell is this? And they're like, congratulations, everybody's infantry now. And you're like, is that a thing? Can they do that? You know? And you're trying to figure it out because you know in your head, when Pearl Harbor was attacked, there was less than 5,000 people that died. And then that pushed us into World War II. So if you're telling me somebody killed 100,000 people in New York City, somebody's getting, you know, we're going to get somebody. And I'm like, that has to be wild. And thankfully the numbers weren't even close to that, you know. But a few days later, maybe a week later, people were getting newspaper clippings from their parents. And so you're looking at these images of like this building, like with the plane and the fireball. And even looking at that image, because I still didn't see any video of it, it kind of looked like Die Hard or something. It looked like a movie. You know, so you're like, is this real or is this like some movie thing? Like, it was hard to believe. But I was in Fort Knox the whole time, so I didn't get to see, like my family tells me about like everybody driving around with American flags and all that, like after. I never seen any of that. And I graduated boot camp in October 5th in 2001. And so I didn't get to see any of that until I came home for Christmas on break. And my buddy was showing me video online about what this was and all this, and you're like, holy shit. Like, it was wild. Like, it was like a massive changing point for everybody, you know? And you're 17, just past boot camp, and you're like, oh wow, you know, like, what is this gonna mean? And so from that point on, you're kind of like debating, like, are we gonna die over this, you know? But you signed up saying, if anything happens, I'll be there.
Yeah.
you know, and they said if I did a good job, they'll give me college. So that was the deal. That was the trade-off.
Yeah.
And it just so happened, something wild did happen. And so kind of, it really felt like, in an odd sense, like a rookie going straight to the World Series. You know, I definitely wasn't anything special like Rookie of the Year or anything that you would brag about, but I was certainly on the team
Right.
at a wild moment, you know. And so yeah, it was strange, dude. Like, but at first you thought it was kind of a basic training thing. Like
that's really intense.
yeah, like
That is really intense.
I really didn't see any videos until like Christmas. Yeah, like around Christmas time.
So from transitioning from boot camp to going overseas, was there anything that, you know, stood out, or anything that you felt was either interesting or just caught you off guard? Was there anything
Yeah.
like that?
So after boot camp, I got transferred to Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, and I was part of a Patriot unit. I was a Patriot missile crew member, and from pretty much September 11th all the way up to the deployment, everybody was saying, you know, we're going to war, we're gonna get deployed, blah blah blah, get ready. And so you're hearing this for a long time, you know, and so you had the time to kind of think about, what does this mean to you? Are you willing to die? Are you willing to like do whatever it takes to get back? Like all these little things kind of go in your head over and over again, you know. But then when it started getting serious was when we started hooking up the 50 cal mounts on our Humvees. So the passenger guy on a Humvee vehicle could stand on top of the seat, and your body would stick out of the thing, and then you could just kind of tilt your chair like this and it would swivel. And so we all had to start putting those on our Humvees. And me and my buddy Carlos Guerrero, who was from Lodi, we actually played football against each other in junior high school and never knew it, against each other.
Oh.
Literally.
Yeah, Lodi's north, right?
Huh?
Yeah. Lodi's Northern California.
Yeah, like 40 minutes from Modesto, maybe. Me and him are sitting there in the motor pool, and you're kind of leaning like this on the 50 cal rack, and like just kind of thinking about it, and you're like, what in the hell are we getting into? You know, like, because we weren't infantry, we're Patriot missile, you know, like, we're supposed to be kind of back. And you're thinking, like, why do we need this? You know, like, where are we going? And so you're like, man, this is going to be wild. And so and then like a couple of days later, we had to start packing up everything, you know, for the Connex boxes, so that we get deployed with everything we needed. And you're in this line going like this, shuffling stuff. And then all of a sudden there's these body bags. And somebody says, like, are these for the bad guys? And they're like, no, it's for you. And that dude just stopped right there and just started looking at it and started crying. And you're like, what in the hell?
Wow.
Yeah, because like you're literally moving body bags, and there's just like little white folded things like this, you know. And I still have mine actually, you know.
They gave you?
Well, I got to keep it. I don't remember exactly like.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly how I came into like absolute possession of it. So it wasn't like, it was just in a little plastic bag like this. But I still have it. What do you do with it? Hopefully I don't need it.
Right.
But weird. And so you started seeing like, oh shit, this is real. And then we had to do like these little cards that you put in your helmet.
Mm-hmm.
So in case like if you died or something, somebody would come by and write like, yeah, I saw him get shot. You know, and it would have like descriptions like he has a tattoo right here or whatever, so they could kind of identify your body easier. And it would have to stay inside your helmet the whole time. And so you're like, what in the hell am I getting into? You know? And so then we start putting everything in the C-15s, like these big planes. And so in your head, you're really you know, at this time I'm 18, like, complete idiot. But, like, you're thinking we're gonna land and they're gonna drop the thing down and just start shooting, you know, like it's Rambo or something. And you're like, what in the hell, is this really it, you know? Yeah. And it was kind of wild, dude. Like, it was interesting to see this build up. And you know it was building up because even at the time Fort Bliss was building a new runway. You know, so we were the first like ones to actually use that damn runway, so they're not building it for nothing. And we started going and like we all kind of, half of us were in Jordan, the other half were in Saudi Arabia or in Kuwait. And that's where we kind of divided, but it was all from Fort Bliss, you know. And yeah, it was wild, dude. Like, but yeah, I'll never forget like sitting there on that 50 cal thing, just thinking like, what in the hell are we getting into? Like, no idea, you know, and no idea of like the culture, no idea of why are they pissed off at us, you know, nothing. Right. Like, you never heard of like Al Qaeda or anything like that, you know? So it was like, what the hell is this about? And then there was a lot of like random questions, you know, like if it was, you started to wonder like if it was about September 11th and a lot of these guys came from Saudi Arabia, then why are we going towards Iraq? You know? And so like there was kind of weird things, but you're like, well, this is our job, you know, yeah. Let's go over there. Orders, yeah, and the thing with Iraq was the weapons of mass destruction. Mm. You know, so it was to make sure they weren't going to destroy Israel or something like that. And so you're like, okay, yeah, you know, we defend Israel, like, can't be dropping nuclear bombs on them. You're like, I could back that up, like, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so you're like, in your head, you're like, okay, we could do this. And yeah, you have to make that faith and that, like, agreement that, yeah, I'm getting deployed, because you could literally walk out the door. Like, no one's stopping you from going AWOL. You know, you could leave. You know, you're going to pay consequences, but no one's really stopping you. And so you know the door's right there, and you could run away. But, like, how do you face your family? You know, how do you face yourself and everything else that you literally signed documents and literally promised and did all this, yeah, saying that you would do it? And now they're asking you, hey, you know? And so, like, you had, if you wanted to leave, you could have. But there was just no way in hell, you know? Even at, like, you don't really want to die at 18, 19. Mm-hmm. But that's your story, it's your story, you know? And so you just kind of roll the dice and let it see where it falls.
And you only did 2 years, right?
Yeah, I got stop loss because of the war. So like when war kicks off, the military will try to keep their numbers up, their retention numbers. Okay. So you're not losing, you know, random people. And so they call it stop loss. So nobody's allowed to leave. You know, whether you did 20 years and you're going to retire, whether you did, you know, the 2 years and you're promised this, like, too bad.
What kinds of friendships and camaraderie did you form while serving, and with whom?
While you're in, it becomes a real family. It becomes a thing that you're really a team and that you really care about each other. So I was around Carlos Guerrero, who was from Lodi, Justin Daly, who was from Pennsylvania, William White, who was from Georgia, but he says Florida. I don't know why he says that. Evan Jennings, like Kelly Shepard, who was from Texas, who was like this crazy gymnastic like guy. You know, super skinny kid. He probably should have never really been in the military. He was like super smart, you know. Like, kid was like crazy smart. And these were the people that like you would constantly be around, you know. And at the time, like, looking back, you're all kids, you know. Like, I was like 18, maybe one guy was 20.
Right.
You know? Like, so like 18, 20-year-olds with no parental supervision, bunch of jackasses. So it was like fun in that sense, you know. And there's like the caringness of like making sure no one's picking on your buddies and all that stuff. Like it was good. I think I got to be around more interesting people for sure.
What would you say was was there a best part of your service experience? Was there something that you look back and you look at and smile maybe?
I think in the like not necessarily a specific thing, because there's a lot of fun spots. Like basic training was actually fun. Like going to the firing ranges and the gas training, and they like do the chemical reaction.
Oh, right.
The tear gas room or whatever. That stuff's actually fun. But I think the greatest thing is how it helped you become a better person in the overall. Like you're certainly going to change. And there's certainly a cost that it takes to join the military, because I'm not necessarily as close with my family as I used to be, and my friends growing up. But in the grand scheme of the overall, I do believe I'm a better person because of it. Like I think if I would have went straight to college, I would have been a jackass and wouldn't have taken it serious. But the military gave me that drive to take things serious even if they don't feel like it.
That's good. When one question here that's interesting. It says, was there something you did for good luck? Was there any superstitious activity?
Well, yeah, so when I was getting ready to join the military, I didn't have anybody to talk to, and say like how was basic training going to be or anything. And every once in a while you'd hear somebody say, oh, they're going to brainwash you, And my grandpa was a preacher, a Pentecostal preacher. And so the very first tattoo I got was the pi symbol, which people consider the number to God. And so I figured if I was ever in trouble, the one number you need to have is God's number. And so I got that tattoo. In the wrong spot. Like, it's on my lower back. I have a tramp stamp that is absolutely true. I was 18. I didn't know what I was doing.
And you wanted to hide it from your parents too, I would assume.
Oh, from the drill sergeant. So you weren't allowed to have tattoos. And so you had to hide it where it's not going to affect your body when you're working out and moving around. And so the tattoo artist said, well, put it on your lower back. And he's like, it won't stretch, it won't mess with nothing. And I said, okay. And this is 2001, not fucking 18. Like, or 2002 probably. Yeah, so that was probably my good luck kind of thing. In the wrong spot. Yeah, so that's embarrassing. But yeah, it's fun. It's funnier when like older ladies, like 50-year-old, 60-year-old ladies go, "Oh, my daughter has a tramp stamp too," and you're like, oh my God.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yeah, it was strange. September 26, 2003. You're going through the motions of getting out, right? And then all of a sudden you turn in your ID card and you sign some paper and they give you your discharge and they're like, okay, you're good. And you're like, I don't know what you're expecting, like, if anything. But it's just like, okay, bye. And you're like, really? And so then you could just leave. And you're like, can I really? Like you're still in your head like, am I going to get in trouble? Like, is this, like, and it's weird to just leave. So like my aunt came down like the last week I was in, and I would take her around El Paso and show her around and stuff, and then we drove back to Modesto together. So that was actually really cool that my aunt took the time to drive back with me to Modesto. Like, that was fun. But yeah, there wasn't anything special. Like it was just like, thank you, bye-bye. And when you get your discharge certificate, for some reason you're thinking it's going to be this fancy looking thing. And it's just this one-page sheet that's like, yeah, he was in and he's got these things and good job. And you're like, it's kind of boring looking, you know?
Right.
And you're like, this is what I was working for? Is this thing? Like, I don't know why you're expecting some, like, handwritten scroll or something, like, I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, when you look at this thing, you're like, well, I thought there was more to it than this. And I got out September 2003, so they didn't really have the medals designed for, you know, the Iraq War stuff yet.
Okay.
You just knew you earned them. And so they're like, oh, don't worry, they'll be in the mail.
Okay.
You know, and so I didn't see those till 10 years later or something.
Wow.
Yeah. When I ordered them.
You were your own DSO?
Yeah, basically, yeah, when I got the job, and then I figured out you could order the medals, but then even then I just looked at them for like a day or two and gave them to my dad, and I was like, I never met anybody who specifically went out to try to earn a medal. You know, like nobody goes, oh, I hope I get a Bronze Star
Right.
today, or I hope I
Right.
get, like, it's just somebody comes up and says, oh, I'm putting you in for this, and you're like, okay.
That's good.
You know, but you had no concept of like, I'm going for this or that.
Right.
Like, I've never met anybody like that. You
No
know?
one's trying to collect them all.
No, and some of them you really don't want. You know, some of them are like, you know?
Mm.
You know, so like the Medal of Honor, like, you have to go through something, and you got to survive it to be able to know that you earned it.
Right.
You know, so maybe not the funnest thing to earn. Like, it's incredible, but that dude had to go through something.
Yeah.
You know, same thing with the Bronze Star, same thing with the Purple Heart. Like, you had to go through something.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've never met anybody who specifically tried to get a specific medal.
So we mentioned that you're a veteran service officer. What led you to that career?
So, when I got out, I was 19, and it was 2003, so the war was still fresh in the news and everything, and so I honorable vet, you know, graduated high school with honors. I'm like, I'm going to get a good job. I go back to Modesto, and I couldn't get a job to save my life. I'm like, you would apply to McDonald's, you'd apply everywhere, and just couldn't get a job, and you're like, what the hell, man? And so, started doing the junior college thing, thinking you might as well do something with your free time. So I was literally taking like 16, 18 units a semester or more. I think one semester I did 20 units. I'm like, you had nothing to do. I literally didn't even have a car to get to the junior college, so like I get dropped off in the morning and left there all day.
Wow.
You know, but it was good because I had nowhere to go, so you had to do homework. But because of that, I kind of had this smart ass kind of attitude, like, if you're going to be the next homeless vet, you better start learning. And so I started working at a homeless veteran shelter. And you would hear guys talking about benefits. And the whole time, like, probably like a lot of guys still today, you go like, why would they pay me for the rest of my life? Like, who am I? You know, like, I got all my fingers and toes, like, I'm nothing special. Why would you pay me? And so you thought it was just crazy guys talking weird, you know? And once you started going to like the stand downs and veteran events and you started seeing that this was a real thing, then you started realizing that you understood where these guys were coming from. And you knew basic things like food stamps and bus passes and, you know, the basic struggles of trying to keep an electricity bill on and things like that. So when I became a service officer, I was blessed in the sense that I went through all that negative. You know, being homeless, losing your house, not getting a job, like all these things. And so when people came to me telling about their problems, like, it wasn't just me feeling sorry, it was me understanding. And so it was a blessing, you know, like, so I do think, like, if God has a plan for you, I was very fortunate to go through all that stuff at an early age to understand how it feels, and instead of just feeling sorry for somebody, you know. And part of being a service officer too is like, even though I don't wear the uniform anymore, you still gave an oath to take care of the country and take care of the person to your left and right.
Right.
And when these people come to you and asking you for help, you try like hell to give them your best effort. You know, sometimes your best effort isn't going to win, but you try like hell. And hopefully if for whatever reason they don't like your style or it didn't work out, then hopefully you did a good enough job to where the next guy they talk to could pick up the ball where you left off and get it in there, you know. So hopefully you gave him a strong standing platform to bounce off of. But yeah, I think it was a blessing to be able to still work with vets, you know, and I just had no idea that it would turn out like this.
And you said you were going to school. Was that the GI Bill that supported your education?
Yeah, so I used the Montgomery GI Bill at first because I still fell under the older one, and I got a couple associate's degrees because I literally had nothing to do, you know, because I kept saying if I can't get a good job, well then I'll just keep getting degrees until somebody likes me. You know, eventually somebody's gonna have to give me a shot. And so I just kept pushing that, and so I got the associate's degrees, and then I transferred into CSU Stanislaus for economics, and then went to CSUN down the road, and then that's when I got the county job in 2010. Yeah, and so then I was really scared about the county because like I never had a county job or anything like that. So they're like, do you still plan on going to school? You're like, no, we're good. You know, like, no, all my time's for you. And once I realized you could still go to school, I was thinking about going into law school, and one of my vets from Sepulveda showed me this school, and he told the dean, he's like, this is what Joe's been doing, this is, you know, what he does and everything, and they said, okay, well, you won't have to take the LSTATs or nothing, just sign up.
Wow.
And I was like, you're not going to get another shot like this ever. You know, like somebody's willing to use your job experiences.
Vouch for you.
Yeah. And I figured, let's roll the dice, you know. I never in a million years would you ever think any law school in the world would accept you. You know? And it was all just about backing veterans. Like I'm not interested in being Johnny Cochran. I'm not interested in trying to be a millionaire off of it. It's literally, I was hoping, like, even if I didn't graduate law school, that it would help me in my job a little bit better to help that next guy.
Right.
And that's all it was. And simple curiosity if you could do it. And it was so strange, dude. So strange when you see something that says doctorate degree, and you're just like, that should have never happened. You know,
So you're a doctor now.
in a weird sense, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, me and a few guys will joke about it every once in a while, but like, if you talk to any vets that kind of know me, they'll just say, talk to Joe.
Right.
You know, it's not even a last name, and most of them don't even know I work for the county. And it's because it's really just about taking care of them. Like, the titles and all that don't really mean anything. It's about that effort.
Right.
And yeah, it's wild though. Like, that's one thing you would have never guessed. Like, going into 10th grade in high school, my guidance counselor told me I should just drop out and get my GED.
Wow.
Yeah, so like there was never an expectation of me being anything. But it was the faith of myself to keep trying, and really the military to show you the drive and show you that you can achieve things that are way beyond your beliefs. You know, whether it's working, 20-hour shifts, and climbing up a big ass wall, doing whatever the hell. Like, the military teaches you can do these things and you're going to. And there's no question about it. Like, when the military says you have to do this, you're going to do it. And so you kind of were instilled with those principles that you're capable. And so that, I think, is that true blessing of having the faith in yourself and knowing that you can achieve things that are beyond your own thought.
Yeah.
You know, like, wild.
Yeah, it's wild. It's beautiful. That's really awesome. So do you put PhD on your card?
No.
You don't?
No. It's honestly, like, I put it in a picture frame because people told me I should, but it's honestly in the closet. Like, in the spare room, not even in my room. Like, it's just chilling. Like, you know what you did.
Mm.
You know what you achieved, and you know what you know, like, you know what you did right, you know what you did wrong. And if you did something right, you don't really need to brag about it. And I think the biggest thing that I really hoped out of it is to encourage other people in a funny but true sense of, if this idiot can do it, that means I can too. You know? And so I hope more than anything that you're an example for the ones that have nothing to lean on, to say, well, that guy can do it. Yeah. You know, because I was in resource classes my whole life, after school classes, summer classes, all that stuff. Like, my going into ninth grade, I was in a program called School Within a School, or SWS. And when we went to Series High, we were the top 90 most likely not to graduate. That was what we were told the very first day of high school. And so to make sure that we would stay on point, you know how like you go transfer one class to the other and you gotta walk around? Mm-hmm. The portables were like this. So you just go 1, 2, like that. You know, to make sure they knew where you were and everything. There was no expectation of me graduating high school. There was nothing. And so I hope I can encourage people like that.
Yeah.
You know, the ones who you could point your finger and say, no effing way. I love underdogs. Yeah.
Awesome.
And so that's what I hope I could encourage in some kind of way.